What I would like to point to as I reflect on the opportunity as well as the challenge of meeting here with you all today and working with the Hey Neighbor Collective is the phenomenal opportunity that I have as a non-Indigenous person doing this work to learn from the original inhabitants of this land who have lived here since time immemorial in a context where every spring I have to figure out how to coax a pumpkin out of the soil. We have the opportunity to learn about neighborliness and about working together with the whole community with the original inhabitants of this land, and it is indeed a privilege. For all our friends in Zoom, this morning's panel is hybrid, and so we will work together with you as well as with the people in the room. Closed captioning is available, and please make use of it. It should be a little CC button in the corner of your screen. There are a variety of restrooms available. There are gender-neutral washrooms on the second floor. We're here on the lower concourse, so the floor is 2 floors up. And we're very grateful for a number of sponsors whose logos I will show you in a moment. Okay. So thanks very much to our sponsors. We're here for 2 days of events. We have over 400 people registered for one or more of our events throughout the 2 days. They are available online as well as in person. We've got 17 or more different presenters from as far away as Spain and as close at home as the Squamish Nation. I'm going to turn it over to Michelle. Good luck working the clicker.
All right, thank you very much, Meg, for that nice introduction. So, why does being socially connected matter? We all know kind of in our bodies that we're happier when we're connected, but there's a huge body of evidence to say that when you are chronically lonely or isolated, it is as bad for you as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And it can increase risk of premature death by as much as 50%. So this isn't your garden variety loneliness it is at some point, but really chronic loneliness and isolation. And conversely, strong social supports and connections are associated with better physical and mental health and reduced cognitive decline. And I think all of us who've been through the pandemic and crises really understand this in our bones. Even if we didn't experience it intensively personally before, we really now know. And when Hey Neighbor Collective launched 3 years ago, I had the sense sometimes that people thought, oh, this is kind of a sweet idea that you're doing. And then after the pandemic, the reaction to the work has really changed quite a bit. So why are social connections with your neighbors important? We know that having experienced the pandemic, we can't always rely on our friend networks, our family networks, our work networks to support us in times of need. So it's really critical that we know our neighbors, because when a crisis hits, you need to feel comfortable both giving and receiving help. But it's associated with a lot of other things too. When you know your neighbors, you develop a stronger sense of local belonging, which is associated with things like higher voting rates and civic engagement. In neighborhoods where people feel better connections with their neighbors, they are also more likely to feel a sense of trust and, for example, allow their kids to play alone in the neighborhood. For youth, there's better physical and mental health, feelings of safety and self-esteem, and less risky behavior. And then for older adults, which is where most of our policy attention lies in this area, there's huge impacts with even just with connections with neighbors around decreased loneliness and increased self-reported health, lower risk of mortality and whatnot. We just recently released an evidence backgrounder by Meredith, who's in the room here, that's available upstairs if you're interested. Into quite a lot of depth about specifically connections with neighbors and why that's important. So, back in 2012, Vancouver Foundation did a study in Metro Vancouver around issues of importance to people, and they expected that that affordability and housing would be top of the list, and they were high, but actually what came up was that people really felt a decreased sense of belonging and connection in their communities. And this was across the board and affected people from all walks of life and all ages and backgrounds. But there was, when they dug deeper, some interesting results about housing. And it showed that amongst factors that could increase your vulnerability to loneliness was where and how you lived. And so people in higher density housing were less likely to know their neighbors' names or to feel a sense of trust in their neighbors, to have done favors for their neighbors, and higher likelihood that they had difficulty making friends. Now, of course, living in a high-rise doesn't mean you're lonely, and living in a detached home doesn't mean you're socially connected. But there is enough evidence out there to suggest there's a correlation, and of course, anecdotal evidence. Say, you know, I've met a person in my building. So the history of Hey Neighbor Collective is that it started actually as a pilot project at the City of Vancouver. And they had done a few years of research around loneliness and isolation, partly because they had seen the Vancouver Foundation research and other global research showing the health impacts of loneliness. They commissioned a few different papers, and in 2018 got a little bit of funding and tried an actual intervention in 2 market rental buildings. Very simple idea. They found a coordinator to work with building managers and connect with residents who wanted to volunteer to put on initiatives and events with their neighbors. It was quite successful, and the city wanted to see it continue, but they didn't want to be the entity to scale it. So a few of us who were on the advisory committee said, can we actually see what we can do with this project? And many of us are in the room here that pulled this together. So in 2019, Hey Neighbor Collective came to be, and we found a home at SFU Center for Dialogue, which was a great kind of neutral holding space for all these different organizations. The core of Hey Neighbor Collective is 6 what we call practice partners. 3 of them are rental housing operators and 3 are nonprofits. All of them are doing some form of intentional programming to bring neighbors together to build social connections, community, and resilience. We have a community of practice for them. We meet monthly online, and it's a place for peer exchange and learning and to have space to actually reflect on what they're doing in their practices and what's working and what's not. We connect them with researchers, so we have Happy Cities as part of our research team, and also SFU Urban Studies, Gerontology, and Health Sciences. And we're really looking at 3 key questions. What is the impact of these various differences to programming within multi-unit housing? What is the impact on residents? We're also looking at what is the impact on the partners. Is there a business case to be made to invest in bringing neighbors together to build connections? And then we're also looking at the role of built form. So how do you do good work in a building that might be really poorly designed for people to come together? And what can we do to advocate for a new kind of era of buildings where the design itself helps to foster connections between neighbors? And then we're also looking at opportunities for systems change. So some of our partners are municipalities and regional governments, health authorities, organizations like BCNPHA and Landlord BC. And so we have this larger group of partners who we're working with to think about the actual kind of systems that are surrounding all of this and the policy opportunities. So I'm going to skip through this slide. Our partners collectively are working in over 50 to some degree or another. And really, it's not just about how buildings are designed, right? Whether they're high density or low density. We really are reflecting on the importance of affordability and tenure security as well with housing, and the role that that plays in people's ability to put down roots in a community and make connections and be more engaged. But then, of course, building design is important, and programming. So if you can have that foundation of security and affordability and housing choice in a community, so you're not having to move all the time, then you can start to put down roots, and everything else you do kind of leads up from there. In terms of policy, we in 2020 worked with a master's student and all of our partners to put together a discussion paper for the review of Metro 2040 and our next regional plan, which Regional Growth Strategy Metro 2050. And we're really happy to be able to report that in the current draft, which I think will go to a vote in July, There is a lot more wording around equity in this one, a lot more wording around and strategy around housing choice and affordability and diversity, but also some specific goals around connectedness. So in their new regional context statements, metro municipalities will have to show how their policies and actions contribute to increased social connectedness in multi-unit housing. So we're really happy to have that wording in there, and we're just going to keep working at it until we get it done, I guess. So I'm going to bring Madeline up.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Madeline Hebert with Happy Cities, and I'll be co-facilitating tomorrow's events along with my colleague who's sitting up there. So you'll hear a lot more from us tomorrow. But for those of you who don't know, a wide variety of work, including this kind of engagement work, workshops, consulting, development consulting, and really is in our name. It's to build happier cities. But it turns out that that's a pretty complicated thing to do. And our main kind of launch, our main launching point for our work has been the Happy Homes and the Design to Engage project. And I think some of you were probably at our event last September, which was online. So we're really glad that this one is actually happening in person. And yeah, we have a great agenda today. So we have speakers from the Squamish Territory, from Toronto, and Barcelona all joining us today, mostly online. And we'll have a brief facilitated conversation under the speakers for those of us in person. Then we'll go into lunch, and then we'll rejoin for the fluid sociability tool demonstration, which is going to be a really exciting panel of people that you're going to hear from. And finally, to wrap up the day, we're going to have the Metro 2050 equity mapping presentation. So some really great tools this afternoon that are trying to tackle social isolation in different ways. Preview of the agenda for tomorrow. So in the morning, we're going to have 3 guest speakers. And then Hussam and I will be leading the workshop. We're really going to dive into what design for social connection can look like. So for this morning's session, Michelle is going to come back on stage and moderate. But we're going to have each of our presenters present, and then Michelle has kind of asked some of our guests in the audience to ask specific questions. And then following that, you'll all get a chance to submit questions to the panelists. So each speaker is going to speak. We're going to have the short Q&A, and then we're going to have the longer Q&A at the end. And in order to facilitate this hybrid session, so we have people on Zoom and in person, we're going to use Slido. So you can give it a try on your phone. So you just type in sli.do. And you should be able to submit questions pretty easily. You don't have to sign up or anything. If you have any questions about it, just raise your hand, and we have volunteers in the room that will be able to help you. And we'll also have options to collect questions in person if you want to do a low-tech option. And yeah, we will obviously probably not get to every question because there's so many people here today. But we have Rob, who's our writer and collaborator, and he's going to collect all the unanswered questions and do some interviews afterwards. And just on our screen are our community guidelines. So in particular, let's just make sure that this is a safe space for everyone to participate, and let's celebrate the diversity of opinions. I think it's really just positive to be together in the room to talk about social isolation rather than being online. So yeah, really looking forward to it today. And with that, our first speaker will be Sarah Silva from the Higham Squamish Nation Housing.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Sarah Silva. I'm the CEO for Higham Housing Society. I'm also a Squamish Nation member on my mother's side. My father, third generation Canadian. He's from Scotland and Germany, and we've been here for 3 generations. And today we're going to present on how we are trying to build back our community through culturally appropriate affordable housing. And just a little bit about Hiem Housing Society. Hiem Housing was formed by the Squamish Nation approximately 2 years ago in response to the housing crisis that we've been facing in our community. And a little bit about Squamish Nation, it's actually probably the second largest First Nations in BC, so approximately 4,000 members, half of which live off reserve. And in response to the crisis we were having, our leadership decided to create a nonprofit to tackle the housing crisis and to bring the Squamish Nation home. And bring Squamish home, Hiem Housing literally means to bring Squamish home. And yeah, so just to start the presentation off, again, Hiem Housing is a newly formed nonprofit housing society. And again, we were created approximately 2 years ago. And we are based out of North Vancouver and in Squamish Valley here in BC. Next slide. Just a little bit about what we've been facing, the Squamish Nation, around housing. And housing is our #1 priority. And our council basically set a goal to bring all of our Squamish Nation members home within a generation. So we define that as 25 years. Because of the housing crisis, many of our members have been forced to live far away from our traditional territory, and many have been pushed to different areas to be able to find more affordable housing. And that has created a lot of issues with internally in our community, meaning that our members don't have access to services, to our family connections, to our schools, and to basically to a lot of our other cultural programming, such as Longhouse and things like that. So it's created it's a huge concern for the nation. And so the Squamish Nation basically, again, created Hiem Housing, but also set aside any parcels of land for Hiem Housing and really made housing a priority by not only by just acknowledging that this was a huge concern, but backing it up with funding and land and the ability to really start developing those lands. Next slide, please. So just to talk a little bit more about what we're doing and the current housing projects that we've been working on. Part of our mandate, again, is, well, also, of course, to bring Squamish home, but we had to ask ourselves the question, what are we bringing Squamish home to? How do we want them to live in the community? What kind of services do we want them to have? And also what type of services and amenities do we want to have in the buildings as well? We know that our community, especially nonprofit housing, but all types and forms of housing, we've never been able to see ourselves within the design or feel welcomed in those spaces. So we wanted to make sure that our community felt welcome in all of our developments. So one of the first things that we did was we decided that we were going to engage our community and ask them questions around what is culturally appropriate housing, what types of amenities would you like, how can we support culture, also what type of like different types of not only amenities but social enterprises would you like to see within the spaces as well. So we did a huge engagement on that piece, and we kicked off our first project. And the first project that we did is called the Mulchison Housing Project. And the whole Mulchison Housing Project is located on our Capilano Reserve in North Vancouver. And we basically we designated a site that was really a great site right located in a great spot right within the community, close to our schools, the Longhouse, and basically a lot of other services and things like that, such as transit. And we decided that we were going to do our first project there. And our first project was called the Homolchison Housing Project. And again, we engaged with the community and we asked them, what is the first type of project you would like us to see to be developed? And they basically told us that they would like the project to promote intergenerational living, meaning that we would live traditionally like we did in our longhouses. And so the priority given, or the target population for this building is elders, youth, and families. And so everybody would live together and support each other. And this would also, again, promote, because obviously we have a loss of culture and language with the many years of attack of culture and way of life through the residential schools. We knew that it was important for us to not only promote culture, but to promote language as well. So through intergenerational living, the elders would be able to speak Squamish to the youth, and then they could carry that language on. And also, so we also asked some other questions. So what type of amenity spaces and how can we support culture in this project? And they said that they would like to see a cooperative grocery store that promotes healthy living, but also small businesses. So we didn't really have a place in our community. There wasn't a lot of great planning that was done in our community. So there wasn't a lot of places for us to come together and connect. So we wanted to create a safe space where the community could come and basically they could listen to music and they could do performances and they could buy, smoked salmon from the Capilano River that someone had in the building had smoked, or they could purchase, let's say, goods that were grown on site or art from an artist that was living in the building. So that space was really to promote community building, but also healthy lifestyle as well. And we also developed other amenity spaces, some of which were to promote cultural activities such as wool weaving, cedar weaving, carving of cedar. Also, we wanted to promote drumming and singing, so we have really large amenity spaces. And we also have spaces that promote the type of the way that we eat as well. So we know that living close to the river, we're going to have a lot of salmon that we're going to be catching, we're going to be cleaning, and we're going to be smoking. So we have places to clean your fish and to drive your fish and to smoke your salmon as well within the development. And there's also community gardens as well. So there's spaces to basically promote traditional plants, and basically the residents there would have their own place to grow those plants, but also to harvest them and then sell them in the co-op as well. And so, yeah, and then of course it's across from the Longhouse. And so we asked the question also about how do we promote culture and spirituality. And so we wanted to create a space where our members could practice culture safely and also of course have that they were coming home and that they felt like they belonged in this space. And so we basically created spaces where they could practice smudging or working with different types of cedar and water. And water is of course a really important thing for our community as well. So so we developed that and built that into our first project. And that project, we actually were going to be breaking ground for that project at the end of this month. And we're really, really excited about it. And we also have 3 other projects on the go as well. We've got 2 rapid housing projects funded through CMHC. And those are modular projects and they are supportive housing projects. And the idea is to house homeless or homeless at risk. And we're hoping to break ground in those probably sometime at the end of summer. And one is located again on the Capilano Reserve. the Homocheson village in North Vancouver, and that one is 55 units. And that one, we also asked the same questions. And the question is how do we, how do we welcome you back home? How do we promote, again, healing and culture, and make sure that we're providing the right wraparound services so you can then move on along to different forms of housing if you would like. So we're just working on creating a lot of that amenity space, but again, we have a very large amenity space there to do things like healing circles, drumming circles, dancing, and again, things like cedar weaving and wool weaving. And so there'll be a lot of really culturally appropriate supports there as well. And we are also developing another rapid housing project up in Squamish Valley. And this one has a focus on vulnerable women and children. And it's actually on the Squamish River. It's a very beautiful project, and it's called the Gathering Place of Eagles. And the place is really there to help us tackle the issue of a lot of our women and children that are facing in vulnerable situations or maybe fleeing violence. And so we wanted to have a place where they could come and heal and get the supports that they need. And we'll be providing meal services, but also culturally appropriate housing programming there as well. And we're really excited about that project. That project's also going to break ground at the end of this summer. Next slide, please. And just to talk a little bit about some of the culturally safe traditional practices that we are developing into our projects. Again, we've obviously gone through generations of trauma, and so it's going to take generations for us to be able to heal. And so it was really important for us to bring our members home and be able to, be part of their healing journey and really bring a positive shift in identity, belonging, and purpose. And again, we also wanted to make sure that we provided a connection to the land and environment and community. So we do have a lot of land-based activities that we're going to be promoting with a lot of our projects. So just making sure that we get out of the land and that we're providing those healing spaces to our members that are living in those buildings. And again, we want to make sure that if we're providing healing and we're providing a lot of those supports, that it is based in our own Squamish history and context. A lot of time, if our members, like let's say if they're homeless at risk, or if they have issues with addictions, they're living in other types of detox facilities or outside in the community, and they don't really reflect our own Squamish history and context. So we want to make sure that they're coming home and they're feeling a sense of belonging and purpose, and hopefully that will give them a sense of grounding and walk on to the next stage of their life. Again, we're hopefully we're going to be offering resident meals, cultural programming, life and employment skills, and other supports based on traditional teachings. Next slide. When we did the engagement with the community, one of the big questions that we asked was, what does coming home mean to you? And this was when we were trying to develop our strategic plan, so the 5-year plan that said, how are we going to bring everybody home and what are they going to come home to? And how can we make sure that we're promoting and basically that we're building community. And so this was some of the answers that we got back from the community. And they wanted to celebrate generations, equality, unity, community, safety, kingship connection, an innate belonging, memory of where we belong to, and drawn back to our homeland. And so we're trying to develop our housing just to reflect exactly what you see here. So you can see how we've been trying to create housing that reflects intergenerational living, meaning that each generation is supporting each other. So traditionally, and even today, we live together in an intergenerational way, meaning that we live with it could be the family, the mother, and their children living with their grandparents or living with their aunties or living with their cousins. And so everyone's living together and supporting each other. And we live like that, in the longhouse, but we still live like that today. If you actually go into our communities, you'll see that we're still living that way. So we are trying to promote that in all of our developments, but it goes not only to the design of the building, but it also goes to even within your own policies and procedures. How are you promoting the intergenerational living? You really have to break down the different senses of the guidelines that maybe different government bodies use around, how many people can live in a unit or what that traditionally looks like a unit. You have to kind of decolonize your thoughts around that. So we've been doing that. And also with some of like our modular units, we're actually creating flex suites. And so we have the doors that basically come off between the units to support larger families. And so that's how we're incorporating intergenerational or celebrating generations within our developments. Another thing that we're doing is really welcoming people home. So we know that people have lived outside of the community for a very long time, and they've been separated from their culture, they've been separated from their family. And so how are we bringing them home and welcoming them home? And so we're going to be having welcome home ceremonies, providing them packages of different things from the land to make sure that they feel connected. If they are homeless or homeless at risk, we're going to be, providing services to make sure that they know who they are and where they belong. So we're going to be doing family trees and lineages so they know where they come from. And we're also going to be it's going to be a celebration and just making sure that people really feel like they're coming home and want to be part of the community again. Next slide. So just to talk a little bit about the cultural context. And so through the engagement that we did with the community, we also asked, how can we support culture with our developments? And some of the major themes that we discussed were flexible gathering spaces, intergenerational sharing, language learning, storytelling, educational opportunities, job opportunities, performance spaces, and access to water. We wanted to be able to have spaces where we could do storytelling, or we could practice, we could do things like dancing and drumming and sharing circles. And that's definitely, a big part of our culture is that in order for our history to carry on, we practice storytelling. So we share, we share where we come from, we share our stories of the land. And so we want to make sure that we're carrying those stories along through generations through these projects. Educational opportunities and job opportunities, of course, are big in our community. And so we want to make sure that this project, not only through the construction, but also through the management of the project, that we support our community members. And so we definitely make sure that we hire our community members first, not only through the construction, but through the management of the buildings and the operation of the building. So our building managers and our tenant support workers and the people that work at Hume Housing are actually community members. Educational opportunities are also really important for us. For instance, we may have youth or students that are living in our developments. We wanted to make sure that we have amenity spaces that could support different educational opportunities wherever they are throughout their educational journey. And so we are developing those in our buildings. And again, access to water is something that's really, really important to our community. We do a lot of our spiritual bathing, a lot of our different activities. And so we want to make sure that through all of our developments, there is access to water, and we have incorporated that throughout our developments as well. Slide. And just to talk a little bit about our traditional food systems, and again, this came out of the engagement that we did with our community. Some major themes that were discussed. We have a lot of really amazing people in the community that practice these today. So we wanted to make sure that we welcome them into our developments, and basically they're knowledge keepers. And so we want to make sure that we're promoting the knowledge that they hold, but just making sure that the younger people that are living in the buildings are going to be able to carry forward those teachings. We do have the Harmony Garden in one of our villages, the Murchison village in North Vancouver. So we are going to be hopefully partnering with them to incorporate some of those gardens into some of our projects as well. And these are medicine gardens, and they will incorporate traditional plants and medicines. And again, it's another land-based learning opportunity. And again, it's our own Squamish approach to shapes and forms of garden beds. Again, we've always been kind of forced to live in other forms and types of housings and gardens. And so we want to make sure that our developments that we're developing are decolonized and are Squamish. And a lot of the time, in a lot of the developments, we see off reserve, we see, the Western way that they do gardening and the way that they design the building, but it doesn't reflect our own way. And so we wanted to make sure that, again, our gardens and our buildings reflect the Squamish way. Next slide. And we wanted to make sure that we were indigenizing our spaces, meaning that we are being good hosts and we have flexible gathering spaces, again, educational and job opportunity, performing spaces, intergenerational sharing, language learning, storytelling, and again, promoting, this is a big one actually, promoting indigenized public spaces and Squamish Nation art form and furniture, etc. And so a lot of our buildings, we have made space and opportunities for Squamish Nation artists to basically come and work on the variety of different projects. And we have created some opportunities, and it could be welcoming pools, or it could be different murals on the outside of the building, or it could be even on the inside, it could be different wool weavings or cedar weavings. And basically, we're inviting the artists from the community to come and to participate in our projects. And what we're doing is we're trying to decolonize that process as well. And we're trying to not make it a really like an RFP where it's everyone's going to be competing with each other. Really, it's an invitation to come and participate and collaborate with us. And we're hoping as well that through, the artists that we are working with, that they promote, again, intergenerational learning, and that they'll work with youth artists from the community to make sure that the art and the culture is passed on to the younger generation. And yeah, we've got different artwork opportunities on our balconies and carved glass to create shadows and atmosphere. But basically, when we ask the community, what do you want to see? And they want to show a sense of pride. They want to see when you come into our community and you see this building, you go, wow, this is Squamish, and just a real sense of pride. And so we're trying to achieve that through our new developments. Next slide. Oh, that's the last slide. Thank you again, Wojciech. Thank you for allowing us to present on the variety of different projects here today. We're just getting started, but one key point I think that we've learned throughout the process is that engagement has been the most meaningful thing that we've done in the first couple of years. It definitely takes a long time, but through engagement, you build those connections and you gain so much knowledge. And so I just want to say that, a lot of time people want to generalize about how Indigenous housing should be developed, and this is what they need, and things like that. But there's so many diverse nations, and there's so much diverse need. It's really key to really engage with the community or the knowledge holders to get their input, because each again, because it's really, you'll, at the end of the day, it'll be a really positive outcome. So yeah, Hochiga, thank you for allowing us to present today.
Sarah, you can't hear, I don't know if you can hear the clapping in the room, but you're getting a very, very nice reaction from the in-person participants. I want to invite Laura Chow from Vancouver Coastal Health to ask our first question of Sarah, but I just wanted to thank you for presentation, but more importantly, just incredible work that you and your team and your whole community are doing. It's the level of engagement that you're doing with future residents who are coming home is something that is so rarely done, and it's going to result in really, really special, amazing places. And like you said, you've made so many connections and built so much community just through the engagement process alone, even before any ground is broken. So yeah, just want to congratulate your entire community on doing something really, really special, and that we should all be learning from. So thank you. Over to Laura.
Thank you for a really wonderful presentation. We're really excited to see what transforms. I mean, breaking ground this year is such an exciting endeavor. Just wondering, for those of us who don't supply housing, but various organizations in colonial systems oftentimes, are there questions that you think we should be asking of ourselves and of our partners to try to decolonize and or better support Indigenous-led housing?
Yeah, I think again, engagement, and I think, you know, when you're doing planning, municipal planning, is working with the local First Nations as well, because a lot of the First Nations could be working on a variety of different initiatives, be it, you know, economic development, but definitely housing. And a lot of the time we do require a lot of infrastructure and municipal services in order to be able to develop these developments or meet our mandate to bring everybody home. And so I think, you know, cooperation with the local First Nations is really important, and understanding of what they're doing, and making sure that, you know, you're supporting services is a big one, you know, utilities, water, things like that. But I also think that there's opportunities, and, you know, if there was, you know, different types of zoning that's going to be done, or different nonprofit housing, to be able to engage with the local First Nations and say, you know, do you want to be able to perhaps live here, or can we, you know, collaborate with your nation through, like, let's say, the design or the amenity spaces that could be offered in the building that our membership may be living in.
Great, thank you very much. Did you have a quick follow-up, or is that good? You're good. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Sarah. We'll have more questions for the group after other presentations, but for now, I would like to welcome Juan Riera and Ruth Toribio to the Zoom screen. Councillor Riera is an elected councillor for the City of Barcelona, and Ruth Toribio is a staff advisor that works alongside Councillor Riera on their strategy against loneliness. So over to you both.
And thank you very much. Now I will share my PowerPoint, and the title of the session today is tackling loneliness, lesson from near and far. No, I think Sarah Silva is the lesson from near, and I'm the lesson from far away. No, we are in Barcelona, Spain. Now I share my screen. Wait a moment. Yeah. Okay. Wait. Okay. Okay. And the first one, I would like to explain that our work in Barcelona responds. We have got a sentence of a Spanish philosopher, David Pastor Vico, who says this sentence: the human being, for to be human being, needs human beings. And I think that it's a little joke, but it's very inspired for to build a strategy, a local strategy against the loneliness. No, I think that this is the philosophy of this content I explained. For some people, solitude is a chosen state, but for the vast majority, it means loneliness, a feeling that has negative emotional consequence. Loneliness is not an individual problem, it's a social problem that concerns everybody. As such, one for which we need to find social answers and solutions. Barcelona City Council is implementing a series of measures to alleviate loneliness in the city as a part of the municipal strategy against loneliness. The aim is to bring about a cultural change in the way we relate to each other by fostering trust and solid, lasting relationships and ensuring the well-being of all, leaving no one behind. This municipal strategy against loneliness is the result for a long process and collaborative work which involve the participation of different collectives and contributions of knowledge, know-how and experience from different areas of Barcelona City Council and the citizenship. The drafting of the municipal strategy against loneliness began in October 2019 with intention of presenting in publicly in mid 2020. However, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic forced a change of timetable and prioritization of a strategy against loneliness. The pandemic did not result in the strategy being suspended or cancelled. Instead, it became another factor to be taken into account when addressing the problem of loneliness. Barcelona City Council is not starting from scratch. In this respect, we should mention programs such as radars and vincles. Vincles is a Catalan word that in English means links. No? In 2014, the Vincles BCN links was born, and Vincles is a platform, a digital platform to create connections between the elderly people using digital platform. No? And was created to alleviate the loneliness among the elderly. You can imagine Vincles. You can imagine like Facebook, but is a platform very more easy than Facebook. No, is a social net, but very easy for elderly people and who haven't got knowledge about technology. By mid-2021, the platform had more than 3,000 users and is a clear example of effectiveness in combating loneliness. Radars, the other big problem we have in Barcelona against the loneliness, is a community action service launched in 2008. Today, it is offered in all 10 districts of the city. Radars program helps to alleviate the effect of loneliness and preventing situations of risk among the elderly through collaboration with neighbors, businesses, pharmacies, volunteers, organizations, and facilities. The different municipal departments and areas have worked together throughout the process, and knowledge and contributions from the academic, civic, and associative spheres have been incorporated. In this 10 years strategy up to 2030, and it includes a flexible monitoring system to allow measures and actions to be adapted to the reality of each moment. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the need to adapt the unforeseen events and unexpected situation. For this reason, the Action Plan 2020-2024, which includes the specific measures and actions to be developed over these 5 years, is presented alongside the municipal strategy against the loneliness. There are two separate documents. The municipal strategy against loneliness presents the diagnosis and highlights the drafting process and functioning of the strategy, and the action plan is an operational overall policies and programs, including the document that includes the specific actions to be carried out during the established periods 2024 and 25-30. Wait. The first result from the indicators selected to measure loneliness, the reduced UCLA loneliness scale, come from a survey conducted in June 2020. The survey allowed us to know about, for the first time, the feeling of loneliness among the different age groups. The results reveals that 3.5% of Barcelona's population age 16 and over feel alone often. In terms of age, the data shows that young people feel alone the most often. 26.5% of young people say that they feel alone, and 19.4% of them sometimes, and 7.1% often. This figure is higher than for the people aged 65 and more, 18.7%, no? And 14.6% of whom say sometimes, and 4.1% often. These results are similar to those obtained in other countries, like United Kingdom, for example. The municipal strategy against the loneliness has three main objectives. The first one, to have a cross-cutting policy that calls on all public services in relation to loneliness. Some research indicates that loneliness does not discriminate by the age, sex, gender, or origin, so solutions need to be mainstream and aimed at promoting relationships, health, community work, participation, and include the design of the city's space. This requires the involvement of all municipal areas. To have the second objective is to have a long-term policy that can address the problem of loneliness for the next 10 years at least. Thus, a strategy is proposed for the period 2030, aligned with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals. The third is to reflect on and encourage public, intellectual, and academic debate about the loneliness. There are a lot scientific about the individual causes of loneliness, but we have yet to understand it as a social phenomenon in order to raise public awareness and destigmatize those suffering from it. And the last one, it's conditioned as a municipal strategy. This means that it addresses what we can do as a local administration to tackle the problem of loneliness in the city. During the period of this implementation, the city perspective will be incorporated so that organizations, citizens, and academia can also assume responsibility, allowing us to consolidate a citizenship agreement against the loneliness to address all aspects for the people's life. and not only those that affect the municipal institution. Uh, a 10-year timetable for the implementation, updating, and activities may seem incongruous considering the rapid social, economic, and health changes we are living. For example, COVID-19 pandemic that has paralyzed the world. For this reason, actions can be adapted to social changes and new realities that may arise. Wait, next one. The municipal strategy against loneliness was worked on the different levels: technical, management, political, scientific, territorial, civic, and associative, and drafted with contributions from different spheres. The academic and scientific sphere to reflect on and generate knowledge about the loneliness, we sought synergy with universities and research centers. The aim is to develop the strategy based on scientific evidence to generate knowledge in order to adequately implement policies and to raise awareness of the social problem of loneliness. The second one is internal sphere, was the first to be established and involved the work and contribution of representatives of the different municipal departments and areas in order to reflect, contribute to, and design the municipal strategy against loneliness. The next one, the diagnosis and analysis sphere. In parallel to the internal sphere, work started on diagnosis loneliness in Barcelona. Indicators on loneliness will be collected periodically in order to measure the extent of the phenomenon during the life of the strategy. The civic sphere, in addition to gathering academic and municipal knowledge, we held different meetings and opened channels of communication to allow organizations and citizens to contribute their experience to the drafting of a strategy. Similarly, it is essential to communicate the entire strategy drafting and updating process as a first step in raising awareness about loneliness. And the last one, the international sphere, loneliness is a global phenomenon, and as such, we cannot initiate a loneliness strategy without knowing what is already being around the world to tackle it. We therefore need to compile international best practices being developed elsewhere and be able to share our own experiences and the experiences of others so that we can join forces to address the loneliness. And this strategy, the networking process, has resulted in four strategic lines and 25 objectives, which make up the structure of municipal strategy against loneliness 2030. For more than 2,000 people participated in this process. I think that this slide is the most important. The four strategic lines of strategy against loneliness. The first one is raise awareness and generate knowledge about the impact of loneliness on the city and on the well-being of its inhabitants. The second, provide resources and service to prevent, detect, and address loneliness. And the third is restructure the city and its areas into community spaces to address loneliness. And the last one is adapt the functioning of the municipal organization to the new challenge posed by the loneliness. If we can develop these lines in different objectives. The first line, we can see the three principal objectives. The first one, promote social communication, campaigns, and actions to prevent this stigmatization and raise awareness of the problem of loneliness. The second one, dissemination of the service offered by the City Council and social entities in relation to provision of emotion care and actions to prevent and address loneliness. And the third, deploy the mechanism to contribute to local policy decision making of phenomenon of loneliness. The second line, there are a lot of sub goals. No, I want to destacate promote measures to facilitate access to educational, cultural, and leisure activities. No? Improve resources and access to knowledge and skills to reduce the digital divide, aim mainly at older people and vulnerable groups. And you can see, I think that we can share this PowerPoint, and the organization has, and isn't useful that I now read these goals, but I think that it's very probably is useful for us. These goals that explains the 4-line strategy. The third one. The third strategic line has 6 goals, no? And you can see in the screen, no? Transform and naturalize the public space to recover areas where citizens can meet and socialize, thus helping to reduce loneliness and make the city accessible from a physical and communicative perspective. That's very important. Strengthen the work of care networks in detecting and reducing loneliness. Promote a new forms of home sharing. No? Strengthen the role of local facilities as relational, inclusive space for emotional support. And the last one, strengthen group support and mutual aid service. And the 4th strategic line has 5 goals. No? Detect and promote measures to combat loneliness among municipal workers, establish mechanisms of organizational resilience to deal with unforeseen situations that could cause loneliness among municipal staff, renew existing service and programs for combating loneliness, provide municipal professionals with methodological tools, and the last one, establish mechanism for coordination and cross-cutting work between the municipal areas and professionals in order to join others. The timetable. The municipal strategy against loneliness is conceived as a cross-cutting, comprehensive, and long-term action with a 10 years horizon. This allows us not only to design policies to alleviate loneliness, but also to apply them, evaluate them, and change them if it's necessary. In 2022, based on the analysis of the evolution of the figures on loneliness and the midterm evaluation of the strategy, the action plan 25-30 will be developed. No? This will allow actions to be maintained or adapted, or new ones created depending on the extent loneliness and loneliness at that date. The action plans will be dynamic and flexible during the life of a strategy, so that they can be adapted whenever necessary. Keeping the municipal strategy against loneliness separate to the action plan also highlights the strategy's drafting process, allowing the experience and lessons learned to be shared with other territories interested in tackling loneliness. Another focus on extending the municipal strategy to transform into a citizen, to transform it into a citizen agreement against the loneliness, based on collaborations with citizens and social organizations that have been working for some time to alleviate the loneliness in Barcelona. And lessons that we learn during the drafting process. The first one, obtain data. Having data on the issue we want to work on is essential. We have been incorporating indicators into the main municipal surveys, collaborating with universities and other research centers, and having the support of the Scientific Advisory Board to combat loneliness. The second, take nothing for granted. The first data on loneliness in Barcelona and throughout the world allowed us to undo an initial assumption. Older people do not suffer from loneliness just because they are older, nor do they suffer from it a greater extent than the other people. Contrary that we would expect, the 60-24 age group, young people, and the 34-44 age group, adults, rank first and second respectively in terms of incidence of loneliness. Third, no starting point. Barcelona City Council was not starting from scratch in terms of its efforts to tackle loneliness, but rather had a consolidated background expertise in designing and implementing programs, services, and projects to directly or indirectly alleviate loneliness in the city, districts, and neighborhoods. Therefore, one of the first tasks to carry out was to map all these municipal services and programs aimed at alleviating loneliness. Look outwards. Also of great use when developing the municipal strategy against loneliness was learning about experience on loneliness in other cities and countries around the world. Look inwards. Looking inwards is as important as looking outwards in order to build a solid and coherent strategy, which also involves and helps those who form part of Barcelona City Council. Municipal workers can also suffer from loneliness at some point in their life and career. Thus, strategic line number 4 includes objectives and actions aimed at alleviating loneliness in the internal sphere and to change practices when necessary in order to adapt the functioning of City Council to any needs that may arise during the 10 years of the municipal strategy against loneliness. We are currently working on training course for municipal employees on loneliness. The sixth one, create a cross-cutting synergy. It was important also from the beginning to have the complicity, collaboration, and synergy with the greatest possible number of managers, directors of department. The next one, ongoing comparison. Contrast has been a constant during the drafting process, not only internally, but also with the participation of the municipal councils, citizens organizations, scientific advisory board of combat loneliness, and the individual citizen. Seek expert advice. The scientific advisory board to combat loneliness, made up of 17 experts in different social fields, has collaborated actively in the municipal strategy against loneliness. In addition to making proposals and participating in the contrast process, it's also responsible for academic knowledge production in relation to loneliness through scientific articles. Collaborate with other stakeholders. The strategy, which was born as a municipal project, begins its journey with the primary intention of becoming a citizen agreement against the loneliness. From here, it aims to involve other external and or city stakeholders such as social ONG working to alleviate the loneliness. And the last one, work at the strategic and operational level, taking territory into consideration. The internal drafting process took place at the same time to construct the strategy and to launch the first actions or project based on the bilateral meetings with manager offices, areas, directors of departments, and the territory. And the last one, I think that is, yeah, the last one. Here you can see some examples of the different actions and programs to fight against the loneliness. No, Vincles VCN. In English, I say that Vincles is a Catalan word that means links. Is a digital platform for elderly people. No, is a social net. Very, and I think Vincles has 3,000 users. Another one is the program Viure i Conviure. It means life and living together. It's a intergenerational project to share apartment with elderly people, with young people. No, and we think that is a very successful and economic style of life in Barcelona for students, for example. No? The next one is Radars. Radars is a social net, analogic social net. No, is a community work in the neighborhoods where the people build a network of social help. And you can see the guide for the prevention, attention, and support of adolescents and young people in situation of loneliness. And the last one, we create a little game aimed at children to make consciences about the loneliness in the childhood. And the last one, you can download the municipal strategy against loneliness of Barcelona in English. We have translate in English our document, but we don't translate the actions plan yet. Now you can download the strategy in English version, and you can download in Catalan version, sorry, the action plan to 2024. And thank you very much. I wish you like it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Riera. Again, I don't know if a lot of appreciation for the work that you are doing over in Barcelona. And I do recall that you said you were having an international conference in November. Is that correct? In Barcelona?
That's correct. You will be welcome to Barcelona if you want to come here.
I'm excited for my invitation. I'm going to start saving up now. So I'm welcoming up Renee de Saint Croix here from the city of North Vancouver. Renee is the manager of long range and social planning, and she will have the first question for you.
Hello. Thank you so much for that presentation. As evidenced by so many of us in the room, this is a really growing challenge and problem across the way that we do things. I was really impressed through the strategy, and especially when I reached your budget, because it sort of puts your money where your mouth is in that case. And I just wanted to ask your perspective on, in North America, these types of strategies are often talked about, but they tend to, and from a European, tend to be seen as an investment in our populations, in our communities. I'm curious as to how important was it to position this particular strategy with almost 20 million euros going into it, for those of you who haven't seen the budget line, as an investment in our communities as opposed to a cost. And I ask this question because many of us are working on different strategies, but trying to get those budget lines to prove that this is an investment in our communities is really challenging.
Joan, si me permites traducir la pregunta. Sí.
Okay.
Bueno, René quiere saber si nos puedes contar un poco tu experiencia sobre cómo ha sido aprobar el presupuesto de esta estrategia como una inversión en el futuro, sobre todo siendo tan grande, ¿no? Una inversión tan grande en el futuro.
I think it's my opinion, but I think that the budget is not big. I think that in promotion of people policies, when you make a investment of €1, you save €10 in reaction policies. No, the prevention policies save money of reaction policy. No, when you make policies of promotion of prevention, you are saving money of assistentialist policies. No, and now we. I don't think that I understand that you speak about 20 million of euros, and I think that that's not correct. We approx destinate to the strategy against the loneliness is about 7 million of years, not 27. No, and for example, I think that the Vinclas BCN project, the Links project, it cost 2 million. No, or now we are developing a new social program that has another 2 million. And now the service of advisement, the service of information for families and adolescents, it cost 1 million approx. No, and I think that we need budget, of course, but the key is in the social work, no, and community work in the neighborhood to build social communities, to build social relationship, no, and I think that this is the key of this strategy, no, not the budget. I don't know. Sorry, my English. I don't know if I explained but I think that the budget is not the real problem to build this strategy. No, there are other barriers more difficult. For example, the consensus about the loneliness. No, to that the people understand that the loneliness is a real social problem. No, I think that that's the real handicap that we have in front of.
Thank you very much. Councillor Riera, you wouldn't have been able to hear it in the room, but when you said that it's money well spent and that it saves a lot of problems downstream, there was very, very strong reaction from participants in the room. And I think probably even $7 million, a lot of us would be very happy to have around. So we will have more questions for you later with the group. So for now, I would like to introduce Ashley Flanagan to the Zoom screen, who is joining us from Toronto and is a research fellow with the National Institute on Aging. Hello, Ashley.
Hello, thanks so much, Michelle. Happy to be here. I'm going to share here. Oh, where is... There. There we go. I think I managed to do it. Okay, yeah, so I am thrilled to be here to share a little bit more introduce you all to some of the work that our team at the NAA has been working on for the past couple of years, which is pulling together essentially what we know about social isolation and loneliness in Canada and what we can do about it, or what we recommend we do about it moving forward. So in the interest of time, I'll dive right in and we'll get started. So the common perception, I guess, is that we as a society have never been more connected thanks to a whole host of technological advancements. But there's mounting research that suggests that being alone is one of the most pressing and growing concerns facing modern society, which is not a new statement to the folks here virtually and in the room. But when we think about social isolation and loneliness, and we see it becoming increasingly recognized as this important public health concern that needs to be addressed, as it carries significant implications for the health and well-being of Canadians of all ages, and amongst older Canadians in particular. So when we think about our generation of older Canadians, we see a rapidly growing percentage of the population, kind of reaching close to about a quarter of the population being about 65 years or older by 2031. And the number of either socially isolated or lonely older adults is also expected to increase, meaning that both the individual and societal consequences of loneliness and social isolation are also expected to rise. But due to data gaps, such as lack of representative samples and inconsistency in variables used to measure social isolation and loneliness, the current prevalence of social isolation and loneliness, it tends to vary very widely. So for example, some research shows that 30% of older Canadians are at risk of becoming socially isolated. And then in terms of loneliness, there's also estimates that have found that about 25% of older women and 20% of older men report feeling lonely at least some of the time. And so overall, the prevalence of social isolation among community-dwelling older Canadians appears to range anywhere from 6% to 43%, while between 10 to 50% report feeling lonely. So when you take all this together, you can kind of see how it's difficult to get a sense of what is actually happening and what the true sense of the issue is among older Canadians. And so one of the reasons why there's this lack of consensus regarding the prevalence of social isolation and loneliness in Canada is the tendency of media, government, academic literature to use the term social isolation and loneliness interchangeably, which, as you can imagine, makes it difficult to appreciate the unique aspects of these interrelated, yes, but distinct concepts. So for the purposes of kind of creating that baseline understanding, social isolation in this context is defined as measurable or objective lack of contacts, family or friends, referring to the quantitatively diminished social network and or being physically separated or excluded, while loneliness refers to a subjective experience arising from the qualitative and quantitative deficits in a person's social relationships, such as when relationships are lacking in quality and or quantity compared to what they desire and what they want their relationships to look like. So while social isolation and loneliness are conceptually distinct, as they account for different aspects of how individuals experience their social context, they also are interrelated in that they've been consistently identified as detrimental to an individual's overall health and well-being. And despite their distinction, they're interrelated. And so there's similarities in the predisposing factors, modifiers, and outcomes related to social isolation and loneliness. And that suggests that there's likely also a commonality among the types of interventions that can be used to target and address social isolation and loneliness. So when we think about the risk factors, older adults are at a high risk of experiencing social isolation for a host of reasons, with the majority kind of being outside of their individual control. So things such as growing geographic mobility of family members, meaning that older adults are more likely to be separated from their families than in past generations. or even a lack of opportunities to meet people due to their geographic location. So whether they're living in a rural community. And some other considerations that go alongside that are accessibility and transportation issues. So we see that again in rural communities where the loss of your license or your driving ability is often associated with social isolation. And so there's also sociodemographic characteristics that have been linked to increased social isolation and loneliness. So things like loneliness has been found to be more common in older members of immigrant populations, where language and culture in the destination country differ significantly from the country or from one's country of origin. Or when we see Canada's National Seniors Council report on social isolation of seniors, they found that 2S LGBTQIA+ older adults reported less social support and more loneliness. And in interviews with older adults, another study has found and emphasized that attention should be directed to the relationship between poverty, inequality, and disadvantage, and also social isolation. And some additional demographic shifts in recent decades, such as decreased fertility rates, increased divorce rates, reduced rates of intergenerational living arrangements, may also be contributing to increased experiences of social isolation and loneliness and in later life. And finally, we can see critical life transitions such as retirement, death of a spouse, family member, or friend, as well as reduced social participation due to one's declining physical health or mobility as they age. And so kind of highlighting that complexity of interaction between the personal circumstances, comorbidities, and social connections, studies have repeatedly shown an association between social isolation and or loneliness and poor health behaviors or adverse health outcomes. So poor health behaviors include smoking, increased alcohol consumption, poor sleep, and physical inactivity, while adverse health outcomes include cardiovascular disease, depression, anxiety, dementia, frailty, and increased functional decline, and also an increase of risk of elder abuse. So, however, like the potential and potentially most concerning outcome that has been associated with social isolation and loneliness is this overall increased risk of premature mortality. And that's comparable to other well-established risk factors for premature death, including lack of physical activity, obesity, injury and violence, and also a lack of access to healthcare. And in Canada, the COVID-19 pandemic has really shone a spotlight on the impact of social isolation and loneliness among older adults. So widespread mandates to reduce in-person contacts and avoid leaving the home, they became common, and subsequently we saw a rise in reports of social isolation and loneliness amongst older Canadians, especially as social contacts for many older adults tend to occur primarily outside of the home, such as at community centers or places of worship. And we also saw no visitor policies in effect at long-term care and retirement homes and hospitals during at least the first 6 months of the pandemic, and at other times, which have been linked to declines in physical and mental health and well-being of long-term care home residents. And the COVID pandemic has also highlighted the idea and the impact that social isolation and loneliness can occur across the lifespan, with younger adults reportedly also significantly suffering due to the restrictions being placed on social activities. So NIA TELUS Health Survey of over 1,500 Canadians conducted in late July 2020 demonstrated that Canadians aged 55 years of age and younger seem to struggle more with social isolation than older Canadians. And this raises concern that with increasingly higher baseline levels of loneliness and social isolation occurring in younger Canadians, as they age, there could be further increases in the proportion of older adults impacted by a lack of social participation and smaller social networks, which further compounds the issue of social isolation and loneliness in later life for upcoming generations. And so to the extent that social isolation and loneliness put individuals at risk for health issues, some factors that have been identified as important for buffering negative consequences and thereby improving health and well-being of older persons There are a number of them. So recent studies have shown us that among older adults, women, those who are married or do not live alone, and have better visual and hearing abilities, are less likely to experience social isolation and loneliness. A longer length of residence in a community and participation in community or religious events has also been shown to decrease rates of social isolation. Social inclusion and the presence of positive social supports can lead to self-satisfaction, and social engagement may prevent experiencing functional decline. And we also see that a preserved level of physical functioning is associated with improved frequency of contact with family and friends. And so overall, we can stress and see the value of maintaining interpersonal relationships and social connections with increasing age, as it appears to contribute positively to well-being, and should thus be a societal focus to improve the overall quality of life for older Canadians and Canadians in general. But beyond these individual and community level protective factors, there are many different types of initiatives and interventions that have the potential to alleviate social isolation and loneliness among older people. So generally, these have included personal contact, educational exercise and social activities, animal contact, skills courses, engagement with services, and support or discussion groups. And further specific healthcare interventions have been devised to address social isolation and loneliness, such as social prescribing, where prescriptions are written for non-pharmacologic interventions, such as engaging in these social activities or exercise. But where this kind of falls short is that existing literature has demonstrated that lonely older adults are often unaware of programs in their neighborhoods, or they're concerned about the stigma and stereotypes associated with being lonely, and have negative views of social groups that have very little or no structured activity. And so to address this, there are 4 general principles from the primary literature that have been identified to guide the development of interventions to combat social isolation and loneliness. So the first is leverage existing community resources that we've been hearing about this morning, designing to be inclusive and socially and culturally appropriate and safe to meet the needs of specific population groups. So whether that's 2S LGBTQIA+ communities or Indigenous and racialized communities. Third, include older people themselves in the design, the planning, the execution, and the evaluation of programming and interventions. And fourth, consider factors related to access to providers and programs, such as the physical environment, financial limitations, transportation, and digital connectedness. So within Canada, there are a number of Canadian examples and interventions and programs to address social isolation and loneliness, including the federal government's New Horizons for Seniors program, which aims to fund community organizations to mitigate the risk of social isolation with projects to promote social participation, mentoring, and volunteering. There's the government of BC, who is aiming to support and improve transportation services for seniors to help maintain meaningful social connections and independence by funding the purchase of buses and vans and other improvements to existing infrastructure. The government of Nova Scotia and their SHIFT action plan, which aims to reframe discussions about aging and support aging in place and connection to community life. And then in Ontario, the Ontario government, through their senior strategy, has provided funding for over 300 seniors active living centers across the province to offer a wide range of programming, such as exercise clubs, workshops, social gatherings, etc. And a number of these community centers have also made the shift to online and virtual programming during the COVID-19 pandemic as well. And then in Quebec, we see the second 5-year plan that they've developed for a Quebec for all ages, which aims to once again support active aging by facilitating participation and social inclusion and providing safer environments and options for access to care that older adults may need. And then bringing it down and learning from our community level initiatives and existing organizations. Funding has also been dedicated towards addressing social isolation and loneliness. So some of the examples beyond the ones that we've heard today include the Alliance for Healthier Communities Social Prescribing Project in Ontario, which aimed to see how social prescription impacted sense of well-being, health outcomes, and the use of the health system. There is the Hamilton Seniors Isolation Impact Project, which brought together community partners, direct service organizations, and research to identify isolated seniors, connect and anchor them within the community, improve the coordination of supports, and better understand social isolation and a community response in ways that we're hoping to build a more sustainable and inclusive community. And then we also see the Seniors with Walls programs, and one in particular, the Good Companions program in Ottawa, where they offer telephone-based group activities for older folks over the age of 55, as well as adults living with disabilities in the Ottawa and surrounding rural areas. And so there are a number of fantastic examples of government-led and community-based initiatives in Canada, yet there seems to be a few sustainable long-term strategies that have been developed to address social isolation, despite recommendations from the federal government's National Seniors Council about a decade ago, just about a decade ago. And so in kind of keeping with the learning from near and far that we've got going on today, beyond Canada, countries like the UK, Australia, Japan, and the US have been a little bit more proactive in developing national strategies to better understand and address both social isolation and loneliness in their older populations. So the UK kind of continues to be the most comprehensive and offer a centralized infrastructure to combat loneliness. In 2017, we saw the launch of the Joe Cox Commission on Loneliness, and that involved developing a collaboration between members of parliament and charitable organizations to produce a series of recommendations that included a UK-wide outreach strategy that kind of centralized on a national calling service, befriending services, and IT training courses. And they also nominated a Minister of Loneliness. In Australia, we saw the development of a range of targeted government and community support programs through the Australian Coalition to End Loneliness that also once again brought together universities, nonprofit organizations, and agencies and community groups and volunteers. And in Japan, where it's most notable for being a country experiencing the most accelerated rate of aging due to declining birth rate and concurrent increases in life expectancy, we see the Basic Act on Measures for Aging Society, which details policies to promote social integration of older Japanese persons and objectives including ensuring that there's opportunity to participate in diverse social activities or work throughout the lifespan. And in the United States, we see Senior Corps, which is a network of national service programs for Americans aged 55 and older who volunteer within programs designed to improve community relationships and also foster civic engagement. So where do we go from here? I mean, in order to address this growing issue of social isolation and loneliness in older Canadians, I think it's clear that a comprehensive and balanced approach to social isolation and loneliness with federal leadership and support is required. The NIA therefore recommends that the federal government, like other countries, develop a national strategy to comprehensively address the growing issue of social isolation and loneliness in older Canadians. And then to facilitate that, we at the NIA have developed a series of the following 6 policy recommendations to help advance a national strategy. So like we've been hearing this morning, the first one is adopt consistent national definitions that focus on clearly identifying the actual scope of social isolation and loneliness in Canada. So using clear, predetermined national definitions will promote understanding through consistency and allow for the prevalence and impact to be tracked longitudinally in a more meaningful way, which could include and integrate assessments throughout the lifespan, which help identify changes in perceived loneliness and also social isolation. And the next, awareness is a prerequisite to discussions and collaborative efforts among stakeholders before additional initiatives and changes can be developed and implemented. So our next recommendation is to raise awareness, to destigmatize and promote best practices for older Canadians who are experiencing or at risk of experiencing social isolation and loneliness. And so it's vital, awareness is vital in combating stigma, and it's important in emphasizing the valuable roles that older Canadians play in society through entrepreneurship, mentorship, volunteerism, and community participation. And employing a national strategy will facilitate that awareness for both individuals and communities, as well as on a larger provincial and territorial scale. And next, we continuing in the vein of awareness, public awareness, it can also promote individuals to identify their own concerns regarding their level of social connection, or an awareness within others that they know. And then while also promoting and focusing on the adverse impacts of social isolation and loneliness. So having access to both information and services and programs should be a focus of a national strategy and executed at all levels. So the municipal, provincial, territorial, and federal levels. And next, we have ensuring research efforts continue to focus on understanding the impact of social isolation and loneliness in Canada, as well as evaluating the effectiveness of interventions to address social isolation and loneliness at the local, regional, and national levels. So ensuring an intersectionality approach to the evaluation of all funded grants and projects is essential to better understanding the needs of older adults and the utility and the impact of interventions, which will eventually help with reproduction and scaling of initiatives and interventions. And then next, we have building this collective capacity of organizations to address social isolation and loneliness and improve overall service delivery. So the goal isn't necessarily to reinvent the wheel. Obviously, there are existing programs and organizations that are working to improve the social well-being of Canadians and older Canadians. But what we can do is come together to streamline redundancies, to better maximize the use of volunteers and services, to better address and build this collective capacity through collaboration in a regional approach to benefit socially isolated and lonely older Canadians. And finally, prioritizing equity, accessibility, and inclusion-based approaches to addressing social isolation and loneliness is also critical to countering and preventing the consequences or the negative consequences of social isolation and loneliness. So participating in programming and engaging with community organizations requires that the varying needs and capacities and resources of older adults, particularly at-risk subpopulations, be reflected in how they are designed and delivered. So ultimately, by developing a national strategy and working towards implementing the 6 policy recommendations, the federal government can begin to establish the initiatives and best practices that are needed to support coordinated and effective programs and interventions to tackle social isolation and loneliness at the national, the regional, and the local levels. So that is the high level, very quick synopsis of the work that we've been conducting over the last couple of years and how that is all going to come together in a much more comprehensive report that will be released hopefully soon. So stay tuned. And if you want to be the first one to know about it, I would subscribe to our newsletter, a little shameless self-promotion there. Stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Ashley, for that great presentation and the work. I'm very looking forward to seeing that report. Some really nice similar themes to some of what we heard from Councillor Riera just before. So I'm going to welcome up to the mic now Marcy Cohen, who is the co-chair of United Community-Based Senior Services Leadership Council, and she will ask you your first question.
Yes, really wonderful to hear your presentation and really glad to see that you're talking about a national strategy and that the recognition we are not as proactive as we need to be in Canada. And we are working at a provincial, the work that I'm doing. And increasingly, it's hard to bring people together across the provinces in Canada and to work at a national level. And yet I know that right now there's pressure for the federal government to negotiate in their transfers to the provinces more money to support seniors and mental health, right? And we want that money not just to go to the crisis at the end of the line, but the prevention and what we heard from the previous discussion and question. And so I'm really glad to hear that you guys have the strategy idea and that you're writing this report. And so my question to you is, how do we build support for your strategy? How do we, what are your ideas of the leverage points, the organizations, the way in this room can be part of that strategy and promoting that strategy? Because it's going to be public pressure of the importance of that strategy to actually get something to happen significantly and to something to change.
Absolutely. I think we need to build on the momentum that's kind of been built out of this social consciousness rising that we've seen in light of COVID and the light that's really been shed on the experiences of older adults and the experiences of many Canadians across the country. So I think leveraging this public momentum and really advocating at the local levels of whether it's MPPs or MPs to bring these issues into discussion at the government level to really keep applying that pressure. And then as we kind of come together to better understand these social issues, I think the advocacy and the awareness raising, so when you're talking to your colleagues, you're talking to your peers, you're talking to folks that aren't necessarily having conversations like this every day, day in, day out, and really utilizing that word of mouth to raise the awareness about the issues that folks are experiencing when it comes to isolation and loneliness. I think there's a lot of power in that public pressure, and as long as we continue to apply it by advocating at the government levels, building the awareness in our communities, I think we'll start to see that more proactive approach that we're trying to enable. We'll see it come into fruition and hopefully kind of work together to better support older adults and also subsequently the other folks in our communities as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Marcy, and thank you, Ashley. So we are going to move to more group kind of moderated Q&A now, using questions from Slido. So Madeline, I'm going to invite you to join me up here. So we're going to try, Madeline and I are going to sit on the stage and we're going to try to make it feel like we're all in the same room having a conversation. So we'll see how that goes. But I just wanted to quickly reflect on some of the themes that we heard throughout. Particularly in the last two presentations where we were talking kind of more at a policy level. And that is that it's really important to know the starting point. We may not have a Minister of Loneliness in Canada, we may not have a national strategy, but everybody in this room is doing something or wanting to do something. And so this symposium for me is really about starting that starting point. What do we have that we can be building on? How can we collaborate better? How can we raise our voice collectively around this issue? And how can we really be part of a conversation about loneliness and social isolation not being individual issues that people should feel stigmatized for, but social ones that a lot of factors in our collective lives are worsening. So without further ado, I will invite Madeline up, and if our wonderful tech team could bring the Slido questions up. Okay. And are we switching to these mics now? Can everybody hear me? Yeah, okay. Excellent. So I apologize. we've got is a question for Sarah. How did you determine the right unit sizes and mix of unit sizes to support intergenerational living? Or getting down into the details. Good. Do we have Sarah online still?
Hi there.
Thanks.
My name is Crystal Cox. I'm Sarah Silva's executive assistant. I'm sorry, she had to step out for an important meeting. So I can try my best to try to answer this question on behalf of Sarah from Here Housing. From what I understand, sorry, my name is Crystal Cox. I'm actually from the Secwépemc Nation. I've worked for HEM Housing for the last few months. Welcome everybody, Waik. From what I understand is that HEM Housing had done some community consultation in order to access the funding for these rapid housing initiatives. So we received funding through CMHC, BC Housing, but as part of the studies, they reached out to quite a few of the community members to do some research. And what they found from those consultation with the community is that the priority type were mainly disabled, that was at 24%, at risk at 24%, elders was 31%, and then the LGBTQ at risk was at 13%. So throughout those applications, just realizing where our demographics fit for that need and that priority for deciding on the right unit size. And of course, Sarah was talking that there's quite a few 3 projects happening right now. So the Hamulchiston one is more focused on elders and youth and family. So the mix of that is kind of a little bit larger units. That's the 91 affordable apartments. We also have the one in Squamish is more focused on women and children, people with disabilities, and Two-Spirit priority. The Capilano project that we do have is the 51 apartment, and that one's more focused on homeless and at-risk women, and then those with mental health, so very at-risk population. So. And so basically it did come from a lot of it's called the SNARP data. It's the Squamish Nation Assistance with Rent program. So we have a program that we offer to our membership in order to assist them with the market rental rate, those that living off reserve. So just to give you an idea, we have 4,000 members for the Squamish Nation, and we do have 1,000 of those on our wait list, and a lot of them have been waiting on the wait list for the past 30 years. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, and I think Crystal, you have well, it's hard to say advantage because your challenge is significant, but you have the advantage of actually knowing who the future residents of your housing are and engaging with them directly, which is not something that a lot of planners or designers or developers have. So that must give you a lot more clarity around exactly who you're building for.
Yeah, there was being a response with the SNARP program, because we're able to help with their rental assistance program that we have right now. A lot of data came in. We were able to use that data to apply for the grants in order to build these new housing projects.
Thank you. Okay, the next question we have is, here in Vancouver, we have no public squares and few weather-appropriate public spaces. How do squares in Barcelona or Spain function in combating social isolation? And are they enough? So this is for Councillor Riera.
Hello?
Hello.
Okay. I think that Barcelona is a Mediterranean city, and we have got some advantage, I think, against the loneliness. For example, the Mediterranean culture. We think that the Mediterranean culture is a little advantage for a familiar structure. No? Another advantage is the public space uses. In Barcelona, the climate have permission to use the public space like a facility. We program activities for kids, young and elderly people in the public space. And the last advantage, I think that not only Barcelona, the rest of, I think, the Mediterranean cities is the urban structure. We have got a urban structure built with neighborhoods. In Barcelona, you can find 73 neighborhoods. 73. It's very different, like, for example, North American cities that his structure is one center and the rest is peripheral, no? And in Barcelona, we have got a 70 little center, 70 little urban center. And we think that is 70 points of commercial attraction, of urban life or facilities. And I think that the public space uses is very useful to fight against the loneliness.
And would you say that that urban structure that you have that is an advantage, quite different than most North American cities, is that enough, or are there aspects to your strategy and action plan that also involve changing urban space or public spaces in any ways?
No, I think that the public space is not enough, but is a very good support to develop new uses around in the public space. The objective is that the people has got a good and deep relationship between them, no? And I think that the meetings in the public space can help a lot to get the goal.
Okay, thank you. The next question is about physical spaces. So in terms of physical spaces, where do people feel most or least lonely? As well, are people generally aware of how they feel in different spaces? For example, I feel less lonely in the park than I do in the grocery store. Is self-awareness an obstacle in itself to improving loneliness? So I would invite any of you to answer this one. I guess the question is, do we even understand how space impacts us enough? And is that a big obstacle that we don't understand that maybe? It's a tricky question.
It's a very tricky question, and I'll do my best, and because I really do think that self-awareness and being able to take stock of your connections, what they mean to you, and whether or not, and how that translates into feelings of loneliness or feelings of isolation, because there is the objective side of things where you can count how many people you're connected to. But when it comes to, I think, that sense of space, I think we all certainly have spaces where we feel more at ease and more connected, and also within kind of the advances that we have with technology, the virtual spaces that people are able to facilitate. So I think being aware of yourself and what makes you comfortable, confident, feeling supported, it definitely comes into play when we're thinking about that subjective experience of of loneliness or kind of that more quantifiable experiences of isolation as well. But yeah, great question. I think we need to think a little bit more about it and kind of work to kind of create that consistent understanding of what it means to be lonely, what it means to be socially isolated, and how our environments impact that as well.
Absolutely. I'm going to jump to another one for you, Ashley, and then, I would love to hear from Sarah and Councillor Riera about this one as well. So the question is phrased this way. This connects with Ashley's presentation, but also what was shared at the beginning. Many seniors live in single-family homes and may be considered overhoused. Do the stats on loneliness and density still apply for seniors? I don't know how much of your research went into factors around housing, but are you familiar with this?
We didn't do a deep dive necessarily into the different aspects of whether it was housing or transportation and how that impacts being socially connected, whether it as a way to combat isolation or loneliness, sorry. But I think I'd be interested to see what some of the folks who are working specifically within housing, what that may look like.
And Councillor Riera, I believe you mentioned a program in Barcelona that is about home sharing, I think, intergenerational home sharing. Are you finding in Barcelona that one of the factors of loneliness is seniors living alone? We have a translator who may be translating this for.
Yes, I'm waiting to translate. Sorry.
Te mandé la traducción a tu mensaje por el chat, pero te la puedo decir por aquí también. Muchas personas mayores viven en casas unifamiliares y pueden ser considerados sobrealojados. ¿Siguen siendo válidas las estadísticas de soledad y densidad para las personas mayores?
I don't know. I don't know because this is a very important difference between Vancouver and Barcelona. In Barcelona, this model of housing doesn't exist. The people live in Barcelona. The people is a very density city, and the people live in apartments, no, in building of flats. I think so, and I think that probably, but I don't know. I'm sorry, but I can't help you about this.
That's quite all right.
We haven't got this. We have got different problems, but this one here, the people don't live with this kind of housing.
I know that home sharing is an interesting model that seems to be growing in Canada and elsewhere, whether it's in apartments or detached single-family homes. Let's call them detached homes. Yeah, and of course your housing type in Barcelona is very different. Crystal, did you have something you wanted to say about that?
Yeah, I just wanted to share. I don't technically have stats on the on-reserve seniors, but I do, just from my understanding from just living on the reserve and knowing about the reserve, that there is a lot of elders living in single-family homes. As their children age out, they go and move and live out of community. So I think, yeah, that is an issue on reserve. And then I feel like the Home Alchiston project on the Capilano Reserve is one of the initiatives to help combat that, because basically that whole project, the 91 units, are meant for elders and youth to get them together to start spending time together, kind of like that mentorship opportunities, because elders are our knowledge holders and they're able to teach the youth of all of the traditional knowledge from the Squamish people. So that's kind of one of the projects that we're doing to combat the loneliness for the elders, as well as having opportunities for our youth to learn the traditional culture.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next question, how are we doing for time, Janet? Are you in the room? Is that my 5 minutes? Okay, great. So just a reminder that we're only seeing the questions that have been voted up, and I'm doing my best to try to bounce between our speakers, but we do have our writer watching from Calgary, I believe, and he will be doing some interviews with all 3 of our speakers, and trying to address some of the questions in written form. So you can expect, in a few weeks to have some nice feature articles with our presenters that dig a little bit deeper into some of your questions. So let's see. I'm going to go with this one here. And this could be for all 3 of you again, so I'll let you jump in as you'd like. Is there any research showing an association between good transit and walking networks and better levels of social connections for seniors? But I'll open that up to saying better level of social connection for anyone, because I think we want to expand this conversation, beyond seniors, because we are all aging every moment of our lives, and we are all future seniors. We probably could be inviting some of the folks in the room to respond to this.
Absolutely. I'll take another tackle at this one. Yeah, I think absolutely there is a research that shows the association between good transit, walking networks, the infrastructure within towns and cities and communities, and better levels of social connection. It's kind of the basis to bring it back to kind of the seniors level, the aging level, age-friendly communities, and the focus on social participation, and the focus on creating networks and creating infrastructure. So whether it's curb ramps, whether it's having bus lines or transit systems to various communities rather than centralized in the heart of communities, I think it really does. It does enhance social connection. It allows people to get to community centers. It allows folks to get out and be parts of their community and to participate, which subsequently has, as we've learned today, massive effects on mental and physical health as well.
And Councillor Riera, you are, of course, have a much denser forum with all the neighborhoods that you've talked about, and I've been to Barcelona, and it's so different than North American cities. And now we're starting to get around to this concept of the 15-minute city. But of course, we have to massively re-engineer decades of designing for the car, which is a gargantuan challenge. Councillor Riera or Crystal, do you have any confrontation and walkability?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there exists any research about it, but I'm sure that the walking networks are better to help the isolation and to build a social connection. We live in our city. We program activity and walks. 1 minute ago, I explained about the different uses of public space, and we use the public space like a facility, and I think that it's very useful to build a social connection, especially for senior people.
Hi there. So I guess just thinking of the demographics of the Squamish Nation. So we do have, again, 4,000 members. 60% of those are living on reserve. So I feel like on the reserves, it's quite a tight-knit community. So the transportation and the access to each other is a little bit better. But for the 40% that are not on reserve, I feel like they're a lot more socially isolated. Just the stigma of being an Indigenous person and all of the trauma with all the residential schools and everything that First Nations people have gone through. It's a little bit more difficult living off of the reserve, definitely. And it does, it does contribute to isolation and just that feeling of disconnectedness. But definitely transportation systems. So when I'm saying the 40% living off reserve, they're not necessarily all in Vancouver. Some of them are, all over BC, some are in the US. So it just, I guess, depending on where they're located. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I feel like another question might take us into sacrificing the break that we have built in before lunch. So I'm just going to thank each of you for all of the work that you did to prepare these presentations and for spending some time with us. I will connect afterwards to introduce you to our writer for some follow-up questions. I know those will be interesting stories. And yeah, I just hope that you all have a wonderful day and that it's sunny and warm, but not too warm, wherever you are. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.